And a stopgap bill to fund the government has just passed the House of Representatives, now heading to the GOP-controlled Senate, where it will need help from Democrats to get through. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has more.
The House Republican so-called spending bill does nothing to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It is not something we could ever support.
Despite staunch Democratic opposition, the House of Representatives passed a continuing resolution to avert a government shutdown. Democratic lawmakers warned that the stopgap bill paves the way to codify spending cuts enacted by the Department of Government Efficiency.
First and foremost, we've seen that a lot of these cuts done to Social Security Administration and things like that, this would help codify those cuts and give more power to Elon Musk.
What is the Democratic alternative, or at least what are you hearing from your constituents?
Well, there's actually a bill that was filed both in the Senate, Rosa DeLauro here, that is a 4-week continuing resolution.
Obviously, I want to keep government open. It's important to keep government open. But the American people voted against the status quo. And so I don't know why Republicans abandoned their commitment to do 12 individual spending bills. That's what Speaker Johnson committed to his party.
On the Republican side, President Trump was in constant contact with House Republican leadership, and Vice President J.D. Vance met with them just before the vote. Even the House Freedom Caucus publicly endorsed the continuing resolution.
We need to deliver this continuing resolution to advance President Trump's agenda for the American people, and I'm proud to be a part of that.
Congressman, it's not usual for the House Freedom Caucus to be supporting a continuing resolution. What changed this time?
This is not a typical continuing resolution. It cuts funding, and it is not a stepping stone to an omnibus bill.
Congressman Thomas Massie was the only Republican to oppose the continuing resolution. The stopgap bill increases defense spending by $6 billion and decreases non-defense spending by $13 billion.
This clean CR contains no poison pill riders, no policy riders there at all, no cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security, zero, no cuts to veterans benefits, zero. And if you're allowing Democrats to make these intentionally false, scurrilous claims without pushback, then you're aiding and abetting the spreading this misinformation.
The House of Representatives, controlled by Republicans, went on recess right after voting for the continuing resolution. This is part of a strategy of House Republican leadership to force the Senate to pick the House's version of the stopgap bill and vote on it before Friday at midnight, or be responsible for a government shutdown. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And joining me now to discuss the funding bill and what might be next is Republican Congressman Mike Kennedy. Congressman, great to have you in studio with us. This is quite a day. It's a very big move right now. It also shows how Republicans in the House are aligned. What was the feeling like up on Capitol Hill to get this through today?
Republicans are united. I'm proud of the team working together. In fact, under the leadership of President Trump and Vice President Vance, as well as Speaker Johnson and the leadership team, Republicans have a unified approach to funding our government. I'll just say, my people, my constituents, don't want continuing resolutions. What we expect from our government is real budgets, and we are holding our leadership to the task of working with us to create real budgets. But sadly for all of us, President Trump and this Congress have inherited a terrible economy, have inherited a terrible presidency of the past 4 feckless years of the Biden administration. And with that disaster that they gave to us, it's going to take us some time to move forward. So what this continuing resolution has done is literally buy us some time. So we have 6 months to get ahead with budget reconciliation, which is another big task that we have, as well as, most importantly to me, enhance our energy security, our border security, as well as our national security, which is what this continuing resolution does.
Talk to us about some of the pushback that you heard from your Democratic colleagues there, specifically when it comes to codifying some of the things that Elon Musk is doing with Doge.
This is a bipartisan continuing resolution that has been passed today. In fact, we have a Democrat that did vote in favor of this. And I've heard a lot of pushback in defense of what appears to be absolute fraud, waste, and abuse. That the Democrats are standing in favor of USAID and spending that is utterly nonsensical, including Sesame Street in Iran and other places like that where we transgendered experimentations on mice. And when we look at this spending process, I support Doge and its efforts to try to find that waste, fraud, and abuse and make sure that the taxpayer dollars, which are sacred, are spent in the appropriate ways that they should be.
And talk to us how this could become a stepping stone to an actual budget coming together. And I mean, this hasn't happened in decades, really.
In fact, I've thought about, Steve, this over and over again. When was the last time Republicans did anything grand or transformational for the United States of America? And it's because the circular firing squad of the Republican Party seems to consistently be the weakness that we have. Our liberty-minded people, my constituents as well as my colleagues, we don't like to unify entirely behind things that aren't absolutely ideal for us. But today what you saw is Republicans uniting behind a continuing resolution, which is not ideal. I'll certainly admit that, and I'm not in favor of continuing that process. But we united behind that to prevent a government shutdown. Now what's going to happen with this continuing resolution, it will go to the Senate, and we know we need 60 votes there in the Senate. We've got 53 Republicans. One of them, I've heard on the street, is not going to vote in favor of it. So there will be 8 Democrats that, if they're not willing to support what the House is sending over, it will be the Schumer shutdown. The Chuck Schumer shutdown is what we're already expecting if they don't have the wherewithal for the good of the American people to keep the government funded.
You're right. Democrats do risk owning this if they don't come together in the Senate. We did hear there from our reporter on Capitol Hill, Luis Martinez, asking the House Freedom Caucus chair, Andy Harris, about what it was that the Freedom Caucus got on board. He said it wasn't a typical CR. What makes this one different?
I was very excited as a freshman coming into this to have to vote for a CR, but a CR that does not increase spending and in fact reduces it by $7 billion. Shockingly, around Washington, D.C., $7 billion doesn't sound like a lot. To me, I'll take a 0.01% of that. It's a lot of money, but it does reduce spending, in fact. And better than that, veterans' health care is a part of this. Women, infants, and children have an increase as part of this continuing resolution. And we, with this, particularly give President Trump and J.D. Vance the opportunity to, with that time, as well as Congress, to get our economy as well as our energy dominance heading in the right direction.
Utah Congressman Mike Kennedy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And coming up, Democratic Representative Mike Boyle and the House of Representatives, in which, speaking of DOJ, White House Press Secretary Ukraine is agreeing to a 30-day ceasefire proposed by the United States. This comes as officials from the two countries are holding talks in Saudi Arabia. NTD's international correspondent Armen Kurdian has an update.
Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted.
Ukraine is ready to accept a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in its conflict with Russia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz met with Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. Now it's up to Moscow to also agree to the deal.
And hopefully Russia will agree to it. We're going to meet with them later on today and tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to wipe out a deal.
A joint statement by the U.S. and Ukraine reads that the immediate interim 30-day ceasefire can be extended by mutual agreement of the parties. Waltz says that he'll meet with his Russian counterpart in the coming days, while Rubio is set to see G7 foreign ministers. Both officials will use those meetings to get the ceasefire over the finish line. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky praises the extent of the proposed truce.
Not just stopping missiles, drones, and bombs, not just ensuring security in the Black Sea, but implementing a complete ceasefire along the entire front line. Ukraine welcomes this proposal. We see it as a positive proposal and are ready to take this step.
And another outcome of the Tuesday talks.
The president has decided to lift the pause on aid and on our security assistance to Ukraine going forward. And that's effective immediately.
Waltz added that the continuing of military aid and intelligence sharing comes as a result of Tuesday's positive steps forward. The joint statement reads that the delegations also discussed the importance of humanitarian relief efforts, including the exchange of prisoners of war, the release of civilian detainees, and the return of forcibly transferred Ukrainian children. Armen Kurdian, NTD News.
Two sides now finding middle ground. President Trump halting his plans to double metal tariffs on Canada. This after Ontario stopping its plan to charge extra for electricity to the United States. Latest back and forth coming amid market concerns. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. So what is the latest move in the tariff war?
Good evening to you, Steve. So the White House today announced that President Trump is dropping his new threat made just this morning to double his tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%. And the latest moves comes after Ontario says it's now suspending its surcharge to electricity exports to the U.S. amid Trump's threats. And meanwhile, it comes as the two sides are now going to come together in Washington to discuss a renewed USMCA deal amid, of course, everything that's unfolding when it comes to trade. The White House did say, though, that Trump's original plan of slapping a 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum coming in from all trading partners will still kick in on Wednesday. And President Trump this afternoon, speaking to a group of business CEOs, doubled down on his approach to tariffs. Watch.
The biggest win is if they move into our country and produce jobs. That's a bigger win than the tariffs themselves. But the tariffs are going to be throwing off a lot of money to this country. And we've been ripped off for years by other countries, many, many decades.
Meanwhile, stocks fell for a second day in a row, and Senate Majority Leader John Thune today saying that while he backs Trump's tariffs, he hopes that they're temporary. Watch.
I hope these are temporary. I think the one thing that markets don't like is uncertainty, and there's obviously uncertainty, I think, around that tariff policy.
But President Trump brushing off concerns about market reaction, saying that stocks go up and down, but we have to save our country. Watch.
Our country had to do this. We had to go and do this. They've taken away, other countries have taken away our business. They've taken away our jobs.
And keep in mind, Trump's reciprocal tariffs on all trading partners are still set to kick in on April 2nd, which is just 3 weeks away. Steve.
And Iris, President Trump also today had a fleet of Teslas at the White House in support of his friend and colleague Elon Musk. This comes as shares for the tech billionaire's company Tesla are dropping. Tell us about what happened.
Sure. So this afternoon, President Trump bought a new red Tesla Model S alongside Elon Musk at the White House. And this move is to show support for, of course, his friend and close colleague at Doge, Elon Musk, while he's facing some protests. And also, Trump says he hopes to help boost in Tesla sales as shares of Tesla stocks are actually tumbling recently. And here's what Trump said about how he thinks Elon Musk has been treated unfairly. Watch.
There's no better team, but there's no better for what we're doing. There's nobody like this, and he shouldn't be penalized. And when I watched the other day, I said, I can't believe it. It should be the opposite. People should be going wild, and they love the product, but because he's finding all sorts of terrible things that have taken place against our country, they want to penalize him in an economic sense, and I just think that's very unfair.
Trump says he will label attacks on Tesla dealership locations as domestic terrorism. And Elon Musk says he will double vehicle output of Tesla in the U.S. in the next 2 years. Steve.
NTD's Iris Tao, thank you. And as President Trump meets with major Wall Street executives today, are everyday Americans feeling reassured about the prospects of our nation's economy? NTD's Sam Wong was out in the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Are you optimistic about the prospects of our economy under President Trump?
Yes, absolutely. He's trying to decrease the size of government. We've been bloated for far too long, and we know there is going to be a little bit of short-term pain, but in the end, it is going to be more prosperous for America.
I really think Trump is a master strategist when it comes to how to leverage the tariffs appropriately to assert the kind of pressure that we need.
It's hard to tell at this point, maybe not. I'm seeing a lot of good and bad, I guess, with it. I guess the problem I'm seeing is all the different layoffs, especially with the federal government.
I mean, the optics might look bad, but I'm sure there's bloat in government. I don't think there's an argument about that. You know, the media likes to focus on those very narrow things. In other words, look over here, but not over here where maybe some good is being done.
I'm a product manager, and when you have tariffs, it's a trade war, you automatically start inflation. So I'm not optimistic.
He started taking office, not too long ago. So I just give it some time. So yes, I guess I am optimistic.
On tariffs, part of the administration's agenda, according to President Trump, is to bring jobs and manufacturing back to the United States. So I guess the question here would be, would you be on board with short-term pain for long-term benefits?
Yes. If it builds our economy back up, keep the money in the U.S. Yeah.
I mean, if it can bring stuff back to the U.S., that would be great. But again, you know, I guess in the past, they always say that stuff made in America is more expensive per se.
Oh, definitely. I come out of the private sector. We always have some short-term pain for some long-term gain. When you ship those jobs overseas to produce that same product for a low price, it's more attractive to us. So we've got to get over that.
I think China does have too much control over our economy. I think it's good if we do bring some jobs back here in industry here. I think you can't flip a switch, though.
You're going to have some type of paradigm shift and large adjustment, and that is some short-term pain. Part of this is the brokers and the traders panicking, and I understand that. They're trying to make money for their clients, but at the end of the day, it's like they have to look a little bit more long-term. They have to have a little bit more confidence in the market.
It's about supporting the American entrepreneur, and which is truly the heartbeat of the American economy, bringing that back and helping the private sector grow the American economy to what it's capable of being.
And British police have arrested the captain of a cargo ship that hit a tanker transporting jet fuel for the U.S. military off the northeastern coast of England. One sailor is presumed to have died in the collision that set both vessels ablaze. The other 37 crew members from the two vessels were brought safely ashore in the port of Grimsby, north of London, with no major injuries to report. Police say the 59-year-old captain, who has not been named or charged, was detained on suspicion of gross negligence, manslaughter, in connection with the collision. The British government said there was no indication of foul play. The U.S. and Portugal, the countries where the vessels are flagged, will lead the investigation. UK officials were watching for damage to birds and sea life from the jet fuel spill into the North Sea. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.